Hello, greetings and salutations. This is Jack of the Blackscreen Podcast, and I have not made one of these in a while. My mind's just inconsistent. Like I start something one day, I just can't keep it up. I just get distracted or nervous or embarrassed. I'm worried that I'm not gonna get enough views or how I'm not gonna make a living out of this. But now looking back, this podcast to me is more than that. I wouldn't care less if nobody saw this. I only care if there's a chance people would, and I don't care how much money or if I don't make a single dime off of this. Because you don't have to agree with what I say, but I think it's important that we bring up these conversations and that they're addressed. But that's the disclaimer. I say a lot of different talking points. I talk about different subjects, and there's a very good chance you will not agree. There's probably a majority chance you will not agree with everything I say, and that's fine. That's not what I'm trying to do. First I want to mention, what you were told as a child is, in a conversation, never talk about politics and never talk about religion. And I want to talk about, I'm probably not going to talk about religion. I'm definitely going to talk about politics. But what I want to say is, I think people, as people, we can have very productive and introspective discussions about both of these topics. And I think we can do them without being contentious, without angering each other, without dividing each other. We can disagree without those things, but what happens is people interpret a different political opinion as an emotional attack on their character, which I don't believe it is. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I'm necessarily attacking your character. It might mean that I'm questioning, where your mindset is on a certain issue, and, and how it aligns with your moral compass. So maybe I'm questioning your character, but I'm not attacking your character. And people get defensive and people get emotional, and turns what was once a discussion into can turn into a shouting match, even sometimes physical arguments, because people feel so attacked. They feel like their ego and character has been attacked. And I think that's a universal feeling in general. I think that a part of our ego and a part of what we define ourselves as is the things that we believe in. And when those things get questioned, I think it can sometimes hit in a different way. Something that you feel like is something that is within your own character, within what makes you you and what you believe in, and that person is saying, well, I'm not sure I believe in that. And the thing is I think it's not as personal as people make it as. I think that people always should be open to change, even if they feel like it's something that is morally important to them. I think people should always be open to change and open to different perspectives. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with that person, but it means just taking the chance to process what is being mentioned and taking the chance to understand it and make your own conclusion on it. It can be one thing, and I think it makes us human. One thing that influences us is definitely external things. There's a phrase that, and I think a lot of us, especially when we were teenagers, we heard this phrase, it's you are who you hang out with. If you hang out with kids that are not doing the right thing, there's a chance that you might not do the right thing. because as humans, we're social creatures and we want to be accepted in a group. It's a survival instinct to want to be accepted. And sometimes that can be used to manipulate us and affect the things we do, and have us make decisions that in our hearts we don't believe in necessarily, because we feel, because others act in a certain way, that if your family thinks a certain way, you feel that you should think that way. Or if your friends think a certain way, or coworkers, or whoever you're around the most. One thing I'll say is that education is the best discipline, and usually I say that about parenting techniques, but you could say this about anything, is if you educate yourself on something, take the time to understand something and like I said before, process something. I did this with abortion. I took the time to process the issue. I'm not going to say my opinions on it at this point because I don't think it's necessarily important in the discussion. Maybe later in this podcast I will. Who knows? But I took the time to understand the issue and try to understand both sides of the issue and where people were coming from. And I made my conclusion. Now, of course, I'm always willing to hear different opinions about it, and my opinion is always malleable. But I feel that's one of my actually firmer stances, because I'm confident in that conclusion. There's a lot of stances that I'm not very firm of. Like, my religious stance is not very firm, because there's no way I can educate myself on religious text, but still, because of that, I don't feel fully confident in a lot of religious texts. Fully confident, I can't fathom myself to think that a human being's, I think anything that a human being touches is guaranteed 100% to be imperfect. And many of the morals in the Bible, there's a lot of good morals, but the Bible isn't a perfect text either. And I'm not right now, to be honest, I'm not super prepared for a religious argument. For me personally, I believe if the Bible's very old text, and it's been translated in so many times in so many different languages. Even if the original scripture was true, I believe if you translate enough, and especially during those days, translating wasn't like it is today. It isn't like you can, today if you want to translate something, you can literally go on Google and type it in and it'll give out a little answer. But even then, Google can't guarantee you, or whatever translating device can't guarantee you a authentically 100% translation. And the same goes for the Bible. The original Bible's in Hebrew. Hebrew and English, the language I speak, they're in two different language groups. And I'm not saying this is the only reason why I'm not what people call a believer, or why I'm not a formal Christian, but it's my main reason. It's in Hebrew, and Hebrew's in the Semitic language family, so it's related to the languages in that Middle East, Levant area, and historically it has. English is an Indo-European language, and it's related to it in a Germanic language and all that sort of thing, but they're not super related languages. And of course, you can translate them, but the farther the languages go, like language family wise, the harder it is to translate, as the grammar differences and the difference of structure within the words themselves and stuff, and the way you need to even think to process a different language can be so different that it can be hard, like it can be hard to get a accurate it gets harder and harder to make an accurate translation. So you take the Bible, and not only was the Bible it was translated in different languages too, like Latin and stuff like that, and you know French, German, and stuff, and or whatever languages that those dialects were at the time. I think the main Bible during the medieval ages was the Latin Bible, and then of course the Bible that most Americans and British people use is the St. James Bible. And the thing is there's so many things, and even now, a lot of the Bible, there's many things. First of all, the words in the Bible themselves can be translated to mean so many different things. If God, to me, wanted to spread his word, wouldn't he make it easier for people to understand him? Like, wouldn't it be pretty easy for us to understand his word? Like, why would it's not really gatekeeping if you think about it, but a lot of I've been to churches and stuff, but a lot of churches is people trying to translate and paraphrase what the Bible is. It's like, if God and Jesus and these people, and not, I get maybe the apostles and stuff, but like if Jesus wanted to spread his word and spread what he believed in, wouldn't he try to make what he had to say as easily understandable as possible for the people for the people? If I, and I'm not saying I am a god, but I feel like if I were a god, I would want to guarantee that my word was easy for people to understand. And I wouldn't like the fact that some other people who all have different intentions of what they want to do with it are trying to paraphrase. And a lot of the times the people who are paraphrasing it for their own agenda. Because they want to, and I feel like even a lot of Christians could agree with me here, that they want to push out their agenda and what they believe in and spread their word more than spread the actual word of God. They want to translate it in a way to manipulate their audience into believing what they believe. And that's why, you see all these other sects and religions, like, for example, the Church of Latter-day Saints, Mormonism, and, Jehovah's Witnesses, and those types of people, because, but those are way, off. But, and honestly, actually, no, thinking about it, like, the Book of Mormon, actually, I don't think any Christian, I think most Christians would think it's very heretical, actually. But even, look at all the sects of Christianity there are. There's Lutheranism, Calvinism, Baptist, Presbyterian, Catholic, all these different groups. And, it's all because people are trying to deal with these, like, translations of, like, through many different translations through centuries. Another reason is, for me in life in general, I don't believe in giving blind faith to anything. This is more of a me thing personally, but for example, I believe in the art of asking questions and always questioning the world around you. I think the only way we can improve the world we live in is by asking questions. You know, like why is the education system the way it is? Why is the housing situation the way it is? Why do the roads look like this? Why is the sun up at this time? Why is it? The reason we know that we revolve around the sun is because some person asked and said, why does the sun rise? Why does the sun set? How does this work? Somebody questioned it in their mind, like, why is there these little dots in the sky? Like, why are there these little dots? And then you get people like Galileo, who are like astronomers, who spend their time just learning about these stars and then figuring out how they work. And people still go back to his studies to this day because, they're further more curious. Or the people who, explored around the world, they're like, what does the world look like? What does like Asia look like? What does the Americas look like? And I'm not necessarily saying these people are all just good, perfect people. There's a lot of people who had a lot of bad intentions, but take the people who they were just so curious and questioned the world and said, okay, I want to answer my questions. But yet, we're supposed to have blind faith. Why do we live? We're supposed to say, well, the whole point of Christianity, from what I see, is, oh, you're going to go to heaven. Just trust me. You're going to go to heaven, okay? Just, if you keep thinking you're saying you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to heaven. Trust me. When it's like, I don't have any evidence. Like, I don't know if anybody that dies go to heaven. How am I supposed to know? You don't know. There's never been any evidence really presented to me. Maybe there has. Like, I've looked into it. I've looked into different, like, out-of-body experiences. So I could see there maybe being, like, heaven or other dimensions. I believe, but I'm not sure of that. So yes, I don't have total faith of knowing I'm going to go to heaven. I just don't. Maybe I feel like I have a little bit of faith that I might be going somewhere, but I'm not sure if that's heaven. And I don't have enough evidence to say, yes, I'm going to heaven, personally. Now, for you, it might be different, and I'm not here to say that you are inherently wrong or bad for feeling that way. I totally understand. But for me, it's like, I don't feel confident enough with the evidence I have that I know what is going to happen to me after I pass. That's just how I feel. Now, back to the faith thing. In general in life, if anybody tells you just listen, don't question, you have to say, hey, that I believe that's inherently wrong. Because a person who doesn't want you to question something is a person who wants to control you. Because the less you ask questions, the more control that person has over you. The more you do things because they said so. Because if you ask questions, then that changes things. Like, if somebody says, take a football and throw it in the woods. Well, why should I throw in the... Because I said so. You just keep throwing the football in the wood. Like, you keep buying footballs, throwing it in the woods. But you never ask why. That person has control over you. That person has control over how you think. You know who are people who love control? Are dictators. Your fascist dictators. They love control. They love people who just blindly follow orders. People in power, CEOs, they love it too. You don't want a worker who questions, why am I getting paid this much? but the person who runs this company is getting paid this much. They don't want their employees to feel that way. Of course not. Because that could mean that they become stubborn. You don't want to deal with someone who's stubborn. Somebody's under you. You don't want them to be stubborn. You don't want them to question what you do. Then that means that person will try to learn of why. And when they actually learn why, then they can realize it's right or wrong. But they realize you are wrong, and what you're doing is wrong, then you might be out of your nice, powerful position. Look at, even all the revolutions, the French Revolution, all that stuff started because people were like, why should a person get this much more luxury in their life than me, live a much more better life than me, just because God told them so? Or just because they happen to be born to somebody who also had, literally because of some divine right that they have? That just doesn't seem right. So these people can stay in power and do things that directly hurt my life, my livelihood, because God told them so. And then what people do? People start revolting. People start saying no. I want a leader that gets a spot because he deserves it. I don't want a leader, and I'm not saying that every revolt worked and it was like a happy, perfect utopian world. Far from it. But at least, people want somebody who got the spot because they deserved to lead, not because of some divine right. They got the divine right to build palaces and eat meat, because at the time eating meat was a luxurious thing, or wear expensive gowns and wear in trinkets and all, and this, that, and the fourth. And we still, to this day, it's far from perfect. At least there's more merit to the people leading than there was in the past. At least in the country that I live in. There's still, you see the effects of how people, you see the effects in how people live and within the politics that happens. For example, there was a lot of, during the Great Depression, there was a lot of reform, a lot of social reform during that time. And that was a reaction because there was a lot of people that had very low job security. And a population of low job security people who have nothing to lose is the worst thing to have as a government. Because those people are, what would you be now? What would you be ashamed of? Let's say you were a person who was struggling to that extent. What would you be ashamed of revolting against your nation at that point? What would you be ashamed of? Because what you have, what you have to lose? When you have so little less to lose, then of course you're going to revolt. And, as people, and I think, I don't want ever to get, and I don't believe I will, but I never want to get to a point in my life where revolts start happening. Because I don't want to feel, that's one thing about my privilege of living in a democratic country, is at this point I don't feel like I need to revolt to get to, or to get to do what I feel is right. And I don't feel most people in this country do. Maybe in some places, and that hurts my heart, is that there's a good amount of places in the world where that people, look at what's happening in Nepal, people feel like they have to revolt because that's the only way they feel like their voices can be heard. And the consequences of that is, not just mental ailments, but physical ailments, riots, and then people, tear gas and, like, flash, concussion grenades and all that stuff, just for stating your opinion. Just because you want to, just because this is the only way you can cry for help. I'm thankful that I don't feel like I have to go into a situation where I could be shot with pellet guns, where people throw concussion grenades at me and shoot tear gas at me because I express my opinion. I'm grateful for that. And hopefully in this country we don't get to a point where that has to happen. In fact, something like that did happen. There was so for context, coal mining is a very, especially during the early 20th century, it was a very tough job. It was a very dirty job. It's coal. A lot of people died of black lung, which was a disease you got from breathing in so much, being in such tight spaces and breathing in all that, very toxic air. And the people who were working there were not being treated well. So what they organized a strike. Now, the response to this was, and you can look this up, look up West Virginia coal miner strike. The first United States bombing the first bombing of the history of this country was on their own people. Think about that. Their own people. Because a company's workers were revolting and they dropped bombs on them. I am not making this up. Look it up. If you, prove, if you think that I'm making this up, look it up. There was companies that were willing to drop, I don't know if it's the government company, something like that. They're willing to drop bombs on our own people, because they wanted to fight for better rights, better worker rights, in which they deserved. They were entitled to, by the way, because of the conditions that they had to put up with day in and day out. So, as people, if you think something is wrong, it might be scary. And this is the reason I made this podcast. If you think there's something off, if there's something wrong, do not, and I say do not be afraid to state that there's something wrong. Do not be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. Never feel afraid to stand up for what you believe in. Ever. And if somebody, you have a right for that. You have a right, us as Americans, us as people in the world have a right for justice for all of us. For justice of having strong and having worker rights for the people of the world. For people not to be oppressed, for people to live a good quality life. It's unbelievable to me how, how there was, and I think I said this, I did not post this on YouTube. I think I'll post this podcast on YouTube, but there was a UN survey. You can look this up, where they were talking about how they're asking countries, is food a human right? And I would expect most people here to say yes. People having food is a right. People having access to food is a right. There's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is food, water, shelter. My belief is that should be supplied to everybody. Because as our goal to survive in this world is to have food, water, and shelter. Even as, when we started off as humans living in hunter-gatherer communities, that was our goal: food, water, shelter. and that should be our goal now for everyone. Somehow, we're supposed to live in a developed, modern world, but we can't supply this to people, because, well, there's no reason. The reason that people don't supply it, the reason why we do still have starving people in the world, despite the fact we have more food than we need. We have more food. We have plenty of food to feed everyone in the world. Everyone. But yet, people are still starving. Could it be because the companies that own the food supply are gatekeeping the food supply? That's what it sounds like to me. It seems like, and also countries, mismanaging food and things like that, and stuff like that. And the thing is like, we don't need to live like this. We don't need to live in this world. I believe we live in a very coercive world where we are coerced into thinking we need to survive. We're past that point. We are way past that point. Let's stop pretending like we need to survive. Let's stop gaslighting the world and that we need to survive. We need to do what we have to do to survive. I say no. I think we have plenty collectively so that everyone in this world can live a good quality life. And I believe also it's a goal that if you do have the resources, you should give back. And honestly, that's one thing that I wish I should be doing more, is giving back. If you're in the position, give back. If you're living a really, and good on you, I would say, for putting yourself and your family in that position. I have no issue with, one thing that's strange is that, well, not strange, but I think it's, if you made it and you succeeded at something and you're making a good amount of money, I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy that you succeeded. And I wish the best for you in the future. But if you're in a position to give back, and you have enough money, not just enough to survive, but enough that you could literally, store it, give back. If you have the ability to help give food to people, help give people access to water, and if you're in a really good position, help people give access to shelter, do it. Because as humans, we need to look out for each other. Because that's what we made to do. That's how we got here, is because we looked out for each other and we did what we needed to do for our people. That's how this started. But we've gotten away from that. We've closed in our vision. A lot of us have closed in where it's us, it's our family, and it's our friends, and that's what we worry about. We need to be there for all of us. We need to stand up for the people that don't have the opportunity to stand up. That's really, I'm gonna end this with one message, if I can kind of get it out in like a articulate, if I can articulate it, which is just, if you see someone, they say this in the metal community, and I think this can apply for everyone's life, which is, if somebody falls, if you're in a mosh pit, and this is what you do in a mosh pit, if somebody falls, you pick them up. Remember that, guys. If somebody falls, pick them up. Thank you for listening if you have, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.